Welcome back to the channel, everyone. If you love captivating stories about men transforming into women in unique and fascinating ways, then be sure to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. Now, let's jump right into today's tale.
Hannah burst through her mother's front door like a blonde tornado, gasping for air and looking like she'd just run a marathon in clothes 3 sizes too big. Her hair, which somehow still managed to look perfect, despite the sprint, stuck to her forehead in delicate wisps. Her mother, Elizabeth, sat in her usual armchair like a queen on her throne, radiating a kind of quiet authority that made even other witches nervous. She was taking her evening tea with the same precision she applied to complex spells, her sharp features illuminated by the soft lamplight. "Handel, what the hell?" Elizabeth began without looking up, then stopped abruptly. The magical energy in the room shifted like someone had dropped a stone in a still pond. Her head tilted slightly, reminding Hannah of a hawk that had just spotted something interesting and potentially edible. The teacup froze halfway to Elizabeth's lips as she processed the magical signature washing over her. It was like hearing a familiar song played in a completely different key. Recognizable, but fundamentally altered. "What is—" Elizabeth turned, and her usual composure cracked like thin ice. The teacup clinked against its saucer with enough force to chip the rim. Hannah stood in the doorway, trying to look dignified while simultaneously holding up her falling sweatpants and clutching her spellbook like a shield. "Hi, Mom," she squeaked, her voice hitting notes that made the china cabinet vibrate sympathetically. Elizabeth's eyes widened to the point where Hannah worried they might actually pop out. Her mother, who had once faced down a rouge dragon without breaking a sweat, looked like someone had just slapped her with a fish. "Your energy," Elizabeth managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's different." "Why is your energy so?" She stopped, really looking at Hannah now, taking in every detail of her transformed child. Her gaze moved from Hannah's delicate features to her tiny waist, to the curves that refused to be hidden even under baggy clothes. "Oh," Elizabeth said in a tone that suggested she'd just solved a particularly annoying puzzle. "That's why it's different." She pinched the bridge of her nose, muttering something that sounded suspiciously like I knew I should have hidden those transformation spells better. "All right," she said finally, gesturing toward the couch with the weary resignation of a parent who'd seen it all, though this was admittedly a new one. "Spill. What did you do this time? And please tell me this isn't another attempt to help Craig with his love life." Hannah's cheeks flushed pink, which on her new face looked absolutely adorable, much to her horror. "I might have been trying to help him find his perfect woman, and instead became her." Elizabeth's eyebrow arched so high it threatened to escape her forehead entirely. "Well, that's certainly one way to solve his romantic problems, though I must say it's a bit extreme, even for you." "Mom," Hannah protested, her voice hitting a pitch that made the family cat wake up and give her a judgmental look. "This isn't funny. I've tried everything to reverse it. Even the animal transformation reset didn't work." "The animal trans Handel Morgana Matthews, please tell me you didn't try to turn yourself into a cat while already under a major transformation spell." Elizabeth set her teacup down with a sharp clink. "I was desperate," Hannah defended, dropping onto the couch with as much dignity as she could muster, which wasn't much, considering her sweatpants chose that moment to make another bid for freedom. "And how was I supposed to know it wouldn't work? Everything I've ever learned about transformation magic says it should have reset me to my original form. Unless," Elizabeth said slowly, a strange glint in her eye, "the spell didn't just transform you. It reconstructed you." She paused, then added with a hint of amusement, rather thoroughly, "I might add, that hair is particularly impressive." Hannah groaned, burying her face in her hands. "Please don't compliment the hair." Craig already couldn't stop staring at it. "Or other things. Oh. Elizabeth's tone carried enough suggestion to fill a romance novel. And how did dear Craig react to his best friend turning into his dream woman? We are not having this conversation, Hannah declared, her voice muffled by her hands. Can you help me fix this or not? Elizabeth studied her daughter thoughtfully, taking another sip of tea. Perhaps, she said finally. But first you're going to tell me exactly what spell you used. And then, her lips curved into a slight smile, you're going to tell me all about Craig's reaction. For purely magical diagnostic purposes, of course. Hannah peeked through her fingers at her mother, dread settling in her stomach. I hate you sometimes, you know that. No, you don't, Elizabeth replied cheerfully. Now, start at the beginning. And don't leave out any details about Craig's face when he saw you. Again, for purely professional reasons. Mom, what? I'm your mother. I'm allowed to be entertained by your magical mishaps. Elizabeth's eyes twinkled. Especially when they're this spectacularly backfired. Hannah slumped further into the couch, wondering if it was possible to die of embarrassment. Given her current luck, she'd probably just turn into an even more perfect version of herself. Fine, she muttered. But I want it noted that I'm only telling you this under extreme duress. Noted, Elizabeth said, settling back in her chair with an expression that suggested this was going to be the most entertaining evening she'd had in years. Now then, let's hear all about how my son became my daughter while trying to play matchmaker for his best friend. Hannah groaned again. This was going to be a very long night. Hannah perched on the edge of her mother's ancient armchair like it might bite her, her legs bouncing with enough nervous energy to power a small city. The familiar scent of lavender and old wood that usually brought comfort now felt like it was trying to suffocate her. Her mother, Elizabeth, sat across from her with her usual supernatural composure, sipping tea like they were discussing the weather instead of a catastrophic magical transformation. Would you like to explain why you're wearing clothes that look like they came from a giant's yard sale? Elizabeth asked, her sharp eyes taking in Hannah's oversized ensemble. Oh, I don't know, Mom, Hannah replied, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Maybe because I wasn't exactly prepared to shrink half a foot and develop curves that defy physics. Elizabeth's eyebrow arched. Sarcasm doesn't suit your new voice, dear. You sound like an angry pixie. Okay, fine. Hannah threw up her hands, nearly sending a nearby candle flying. I was trying to help Craig. You know Craig? Tall, perpetually confused-looking, currently nursing a broken heart because Sarah dumped him for that git with the fancy car. Ah, yes, Craig. Elizabeth nodded, a knowing glint in her eye. The young man you've been just friends with since you were both in nappies. Mom, Hannah squeaked, her cheeks flushing pink. This isn't about, that's not, look, I was just trying to help him find his perfect woman. And instead became her. Elizabeth took another measured sip of tea. Rather committed way to solve his romantic problems, don't you think? Hannah groaned, slumping further into the chair. It wasn't supposed to work like this. The spell was meant to summon his ideal partner, not turn me into some sort of walking fantasy? Her mother supplied helpfully. Mom, well, you have to admit the spell did an impressive job. Elizabeth mused, studying her transformed child. The hair alone is quite remarkable. Though I must say, your father always did wonder if we had some Vila ancestry. Can we please focus on the actual problem? Hannah interrupted, her voice hitting notes that made the china cabinet rattle. I've tried everything to change back. Regular reversal spells, advanced reversal spells, that weird one from Great Aunt Mildred's diary, that made me smell like butterscotch for an hour. And the cat transformation? Elizabeth's voice turned sharp. Really, Handel, Hannah. Mixing animal transformation magic with an unknown transformation effect. Did I teach you nothing about magical safety? Well, excuse me for panicking when I suddenly turned into Craig's dream girl. Hannah snapped, then immediately clapped her hands over her mouth, mortified. Elizabeth's eyes lit up with unholy glee. Oh, me? And how do we know this is Craig's dream girl? Did he have a particular reaction? We are not discussing Craig's reaction, Hannah declared, though her furious blush told its own story. Can we please focus on fixing this? Elizabeth's eyes began to glow with golden light, making Hannah squirm under her penetrating gaze. After a moment, the glow faded, and her mother's expression shifted from analytical to amused. Oh, this is rich, Elizabeth muttered, taking another sip of tea to hide her smile. What's rich? Hannah demanded, dread pooling in her stomach. Mum, what did you see? Well, darling. Elizabeth set down her cup with deliberate care. It seems you've managed to accidentally perform one of the rarest forms of transformation magic in existence. Congratulations, that doesn't sound like good news. It's not entirely bad news, Elizabeth hedged. Though you might want some tea for this part. Mum, if you offer me tea one more time, I swear I'll... Hannah gestured wildly, at a loss for threats in her current state. Turn into something else? Elizabeth suggested innocently. Because that's not going to work anymore. This is your root form now. The words hit Hannah like a stunning spell. My what now? Your root form. Your magical default state. Your new normal. Elizabeth ticked off each point on her fingers. In layman's terms, this is you now, permanently. Hannah's brain short-circuited. But that's not. You can't just... What? Only documented twice in magical history. Elizabeth continued, as if she weren't watching her child have an existential crisis. Fascinating, really. I should write a paper about it. A paper? Hannah's voice hit a pitch that probably had dogs in the next county covering their ears. Mum, I'm stuck looking like exactly what Craig's heart most desired. Elizabeth suggested, her eyes twinkling. The magic is rather specific about these things, you know. That was the last straw. Hannah's eyes rolled back, and she slumped forward in a dead faint. Elizabeth sighed, rising to catch her daughter before she could face-plant onto the coffee table. Always had a flair for the dramatic, she muttered, adjusting Hannah's unconscious form into a more dignified position. Gets that from your father's side, I'm sure. She glanced at her teacup, then at her passed-out child. Should have taken the tea, she said sagely, to no one in particular. Tea always helps.